A very good evening to one and all present. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope everybody is doing well, everybody is safe, and everybody is trying to stay indoors as much as possible. It is my greatest privilege and honor to welcome all our esteemed speakers as well as our esteemed moderator on this session. On this very, very exciting topic that we're discussing today, which is the way forward in the world of artificial intelligence, data sciences, and machine learning. It is my greatest privilege to welcome our esteemed speakers and moderator today. We are joined by Mr. Sameer Dhanrajani. Mr. Sameer Dhanrajani is the Chief Executive Officer of AI Curate, a bespoke global artificial intelligence advisory and consulting firm. He's a renowned author, columnist, blogger, and a TEDx speaker. He's the author of best-selling book, AI and Analytics, Accelerating Business Decisions. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for taking out the time for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Kritika.
We are also joined by Mr. Ravi Garikapati. Mr. Garikapati is an entrepreneur and a technologist with over 30 years of vast experience in the field of technology and executive leadership roles. He's currently co-founded a fintech startup by the name of Davinta FinServe, which focuses on financial inclusion for the bottom of the pyramid. He was earlier the Chief Technological Officer at Flipkart. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me, Kritika. Looking forward to it.
And last but not the least, the person who puts the conversation together, we have Dr. Navneet Sharma, the Dean of IFM Business School at Vijayabhumi University, who will be moderating this very exciting conversation talking about the future of these path-breaking technology and the future opportunities it beholds for all of us in the years to come. Over to Navneet, sir.
Thank you very much, Kritika. And all of you, let me tell you that Kritika has stellar credentials as lawyer. She passed out as a graduate of the law subject from National Law University, Delhi. And of course, besides the social side, she has a very strong acumen on the interface of technology and law. And thank you very much, Kritika, for joining us this evening. Welcome, Sameer. Welcome, Ravi. Let's start this conversation, and I can see that already our 100 people have already joined us. We have an exciting set of questions this evening to take care. But to begin with, I want to start the conversation by understanding the context, understanding the perspective, understanding the business cases of these terms we read on everyday basis on social media, on websites and on newspapers everywhere. I want to begin with a most simplistic question. Please make us understand in simple manner what exactly a layperson who has absolutely nothing to do with this can understand. What is data science? What is AI? What is machine learning? Simplify it for us. So that people can, really get into the conversation. Let's begin with alphabet A. Sameer, do you want to begin?
Sure, Navneet, and thanks for initiating the conversation. I think, yeah, it's interesting to kind of go to the brass tacks and really talk about this whole evolution of analytics, data science, AI, ML, and also take a kind of let's say, viewpoint in terms of demystifying what all these terms and acronyms are all about. Now, I go back to the days when I started my career in '97 with Gillette. I was inducted as an EA to the MD, Zubair Ahmed, at that point of time. And I remember my first task when I was picked up as an EA to him was to really kind of simplify a 16-pager report into a one-pager MIS. And at that point of time, MIS was a big thing, Management Information System report. And that crunching that 16 kind of let's say, page set of business metrics into one pager so that he can actually look at all that one pager and identify the health of Gillette India in flat 15 minutes was the task. Now think of this, there were no tools at that point of time, And honestly, I haven't heard of analytics at way back in 97. And over there, one of the realization when I crunched and kind of did a lot of these experimentation, the realization was that irrespective of that report, it's a post-mortem. Production has happened, sales, primary, secondary, tertiary has happened, and what you're presenting is just that, look, you can't take a decision because it's happened already. To a stage, because of the sophistication of computing power, the way the data is stored today, and the way today AI is moving into a stage where it's almost mimicking the human brain. Now, talking about human brain, we are talking about the whole aspect of perceive, learn, think, act kind of a, let's say, phenomena. And this is exactly the sophistication of analytics through image, voice, text, and video is what AI is trying to do. To give an example, to distinguish between a cat and a dog, a human eye needs at best 2 images. A machine needs 500,000 images to distinguish between a cat and a human, or rather, a cat and a dog. Now, think of this. With the sophistication in terms of how today computing power, quantum computing has gone up, so has been the need of the organization to say that erstwhile 97, while it was a postmortem, today can I preempt decisions being made through AI? That's the level of evolution which has happened. And talking about the journey, I talk about in this sense as a part of corollary, Navneet, is MIS became ERP with the whole set of every functional data coming together, a daily P&L getting generated. ERP got morphed into big data, where a slew of business intelligence data warehousing tools came in, the likes of Cognos, Teradata, MicroStrategy, and all. The advent of big data led to emergence of what we call prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics, because of sophistication, became data science. Data science now, because of the evolution of image, voice, text, and video, became AI. Machine learning is a part of AI because the more sophisticated your algorithms are in terms of self-intuitive, self kind of a, let's say, learning ability, the more is the prowess of your artificial intelligence within your organization. So that briefly, I just want to touch upon to your question, Navneet, in terms of the whole evolution of data science, AI, and machine learning.
That makes eminent sense to me, Samir. And coming to Ravi, now you have a reputation of, marrying business and tech so perfectly. And the marriages you have solemnized remain intact. They are doing extremely well. Ravi, coming to you, how do you see this, entire thing evolving? What are your preliminary thoughts on on these frequently, heard terms, data science, AI, ML? How these things have come into being, your preliminary thoughts, and before we start into next question. But to the audience, before you start answering, to the audience, I want to, those of you who have joined us late, we are having an exciting conversation on data science and AI, the way forward. And we have with us Samir Dhanrajani, co-founder and the chief executive officer of iCurate, and Mr. Ravi Varikapati, who has been ex CTO of Flipkart, and currently he is co-founder and leading Devanta FinServe. Ravi, first to you. What are your first thoughts?
Thanks, Vinay, for asking pretty inquisitive question. And I think Samir had said the context beautifully, and I may have to rehash some of what he has said. And again, just so giving some feeler from my own experience, right? Back when I started my career in late 80s and early 90s, and much like many of us who have been in the technology realm at that time, this whole idea of databases are largely around structured data, and we have databases that are relational and network and various other kinds. So you're basically looking at small set of data stored in a structured format. And then at best, we did post the fact reporting, so to speak, right? And some people call it MIS, and it's post the fact reporting. And slowly we kind of moved into what we call as what if sort of analysis, and that's when things like data warehousing and OLAP, online analytical processing, and people talked about representing data in cubes, so you can do a lot of what if analysis, and so the decision makers can actually come up with appropriate action to sort of course correct their businesses. And then we slowly are looking at proliferation of data in other channels, and there's a lot of prominence for unstructured data. When you're looking at relational databases, which is housing a structured data, that's only a small fraction of that data is available in enterprise, and a whole lot of data is there in unstructured fashion. So that's when this whole discipline called data engineering came into being. And then people have actually started to put together the plumbing layer, and they actually looked at the various disparate data sources, brought all of them together, and then now we call that as very commonly big data. But then it was a big data blob out there, and then we started looking at normalizing the data, and again at best we did we just gleaned insights from the data, and mostly provided in the boardroom presentations, and they weren't operationalized right off the bat, and it takes a quarter or two before they get operationalized. So there's no predictive actions or a proactive to course correct, and that to me sort of led to what we now call as AML driven self-correcting mechanisms in the business across various facets, regardless of which business vertical you're looking at. And at some point in time, we can go into some of these applications, as it relates to various verticals, be it e-commerce and others. And I can share some of those and the tremendous impact they had in business transformation.
Certainly. And to all of you, let me tell you, for the first poll question, do you think data science and AI are being embraced by companies in a major way? 85% of your audience think so. Yes, they are the forces to reckon with. Companies are embracing them. And clearly, what you just said is being resonated by your audience also. To the audience, let me request again, please put in your questions in the chat box. Talk to us, talk to each other. This is an exciting hour to talk about data science and AI. Let me come to where Ravi left, that there are number of specific, I think having heard both of you about how it all began, I want to ask you, Ravi, give me one concrete use case where I can and all our audience can really decipher that this is where from of garbage you mine gold. This is how businesses cultivate greater value out of a heap of data.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak from my own experience at Flipkart. I'm a practitioner, so to speak. So it lends some credibility when I allude to some of these business cases, right? Just to set the context, many of you know Flipkart is largest e-commerce platform, and at any given day we collect close to about 10 terabytes of data, right? And now, so a lot of work has been done upfront in terms of instrumenting the right data at various points of the customer journey, and there's a fair bit of data governance to ensure that right quality of data is getting in, and then of course there's a fair bit of data cleansing. In spite of all that, you still end up having to do a bunch of activities in terms of data cleansing. Now and then Samir talked about how storage costs and computing power, storage costs coming down and computing power becoming more affordable in this day and age. So Flipkart has done a tremendous job in investing in those core infra capabilities, and now that kind of set the stage for a company to sort of look at data and do some disruptive things, right? And let me give an example that's something that every one of us can relate to, right? And today, doing something online on a smartphone, which is probably it's a 5-inch screen at best for most users, and it's unlike you walking into a store where you're assisted by somebody at the store and walking you through an aisle and helping you pick up an item. Here you are looking at a few hundreds of millions of SKUs out there on the commerce platform, depending upon which category you're looking at. And if an average Joe gets onto our app and starts searching for a watch, right? A simple thing like watch, he wants to buy a watch, right? And typically in the store-like experience, there'll be some questions up front that leading questions from the store assistant, in terms of his preferences and his brand affinity and bunch of other things, right? And that will kind of narrow it down, the scope, and then you looking at a few set of products that may be more amenable for the consumer here. And how do you actually replicate that experience at scale in a Flipkart scenario? That's where we actually look at the data around you as an individual, all the different things that you'll drop on our website or an app, your browsing patterns, your past order history, and some of the preferences. You may not have declared your gender, but looking at your various activities on the web, our algorithms can predict your gender, your age group, your potential income group, and your propensity for a certain brand. So when you have all of that stuff, we can actually reduce that entire clutter and customize the store experience or app experience that is more amenable for your taste, right? Now you're no longer sifting through few hundreds of pages to get to a product that you want to get to. You're looking at maybe a couple of pages, and then more likely you will find what you're looking for, and that significantly enhances the conversion, right? And even if you move 200 basis points at a 100 million user base, that's a tremendous impact on the business, right? So you're taking this cognitive load away from the user and helping him understand the product that he's looking for in a least a disruptive way. So that's call it personalization, recommendation engine. There are various themes that people use oftentimes, but essentially you're looking at a user profile and customizing the experience, and we use techniques like collaborative filtering and so on and so forth. And but fundamental to all this stuff is to have a decent data and having similar user profiles, so you can do and look-alike predictions and stuff like that. Right. That's one. And there are many, I can go on and on, but in the interest of time, I just stuck to one, but many such things. And another thing, probably it again appeals to the audience here. In e-commerce, right, it's easy to search for what you're looking for if it is a standard SKU item. If you're looking for Apple iPhone, you can type in and boom, you get what you want. Imagine you're looking for an apparel, and a young lady looking for an apparel. She wants to buy a cocktail party dress or a floral blouse top, right? How do you actually display? It's not a standard SKU, right? You put together in words and let search string actually deconstruct that and do a fire a search in the back end. Again, you see a lot of clutter and noise, right? So what if you actually bring visual search? You just put an image and say, what, I like this dress. Help me find a dress that looks something similar. We call it visual search, right? And then Samir pointed out in the early, that's where the ImageNet, deep learning and all those algorithms come into play. And we have few hundreds of millions of images to help us predict that pretty accurately. So that's another use case that we implemented, and that's seen a tremendous impact on the user experience.
Right. I think one can imagine that if AI is also now being introduced in as distant a thing like astrology, I don't know if there are any untouched areas. Samir, can you expand our horizons and tell us where all AI is really making inroads, and what are your experiences of diverse applications of AI which is delivering greater value? Over to you, Samir.
Sure. So first of all, I duly kind of concur what Ravi said about Flipkart prowess into artificial intelligence. I think it's a case template today amongst the whole fraternity of analytics AI in terms of how the e-commerce platform crunching huge amount of data in terms of millions of transactions which happens on a daily basis, looks at not only studying the whole buying behavior of the consumers, but also predicting the inventories, scheduling the whole kind of management of logistic, and also ensuring that the right products and services are created and innovated basis the preferences of the consumer. So that's I think a phenomenal, I think thing what has happened in terms of Flipkart leveraging AI. Coming back to your question, Navneet, and on a lighter vein, I must tell you, I think the least thing what AI wants to do is to become a tarot reader or kind of sit in the position with a kind of a parrot alongside. The reason I keep on saying, because the job of a AI professional is preempting the decisions for the government, if that's a government-led project, or for the enterprise, or even for humanity. And let me give you some examples what I'm talking about. One, as a study thing, let's analyze a human on a daily basis. A human, average human being takes about 60 odd decisions on a daily basis: strategic, tactical, operational. What is my plan after this webinar? What's my kind of a, let's say, plan for my career next 3-4 years? What's my plan for tomorrow? So some of these decisions we are taking on a daily basis. Now, in the erstwhile scenario, many of these 60 odd decisions what we've taken is through our intuition and gut. Oh, because this has worked, let's say implement, or influenced by our friends, colleagues, and spouses, with all due regards. Now think of this, all these decisions today, because of the sophistication of algorithms which are inbuilt into anything what we are consuming or browsing, is influencing our ability to tilt, pivot decision making. I visit Flipkart to buy a dishwasher, but what I keep on buying is mobile because adjacent categories are showing basis my past browsing history. I do transactions on Swiggy, immediately there's another discount coupons which comes in, prompting me to indulge into what I call, the binge or whatever kind of, let's say, eating. Now, over there, that is one aspect of AI. But think of this, now I get to a level which is, I would say now, government today, under this Make in India, Digital India, Skill India, and there are a lot of these initiatives which are happening. Think of this, can we relate Swachh Bharat campaign with artificial intelligence? A lot of us are paying cess from our monthly salaries going towards Swachh Bharat campaign. The whole initiative of government to create these restrooms, sanitation workplaces in the remotest part of India. The beauty over there is how AI is actually looking at simplifying this whole task of what I say maintaining the hygiene and upkeep of these restrooms. So if you happen to visit any kind of a, let's say, restroom or a sanitation workplace which is constructed under Swachh Bharat campaign, and you use that, you're not happy with the hygiene, let's say it's a broken tile in one of the washroom, you come out, every washroom outside have a WhatsApp number which is built under Swachh Bharat campaign. Now you take a picture of that broken tile, send on that WhatsApp number. You need not mention any location, your name, or any details. All the pictures of all the restrooms across the India is labeled and annotated, which means it's going into a remote command center, rather a command center which is set up in the remote district of Rajasthan called Barmer, a call center set up where the images are getting collected on a real-time basis. Within 15 seconds of image getting collected, the call center associates, and I'll come to how this call center associates are managing, how many of them, looks at the image, goes through the entire labeling and annotating kind of a, let's say, data. Within 15-20 seconds, he or she gets to know where this image is from. Through an automated dialer, the call goes to the concerned vendor who actually kind of constructed the restroom. Another 45 seconds. In the 1 minute, the whole transaction is done where the call goes to that contractor asking him to fix the washroom. This command center using AI is being driven 24/7, handling close to about 8,000 inquiries every hour and managed by just 4 customer associates on a 24/7 basis. And that too in a district called Barmer of Rajasthan. Now, this is where we are saying how large, complex, unresolved problems are being resolved through AI. Another example, and this is something which is in the domain of Kritika, there is a huge talk today about revamping and rejuvenating the judicial system of India through artificial intelligence. It's a piece in work I mean, it's talking about 330 million cases in India. 84% of them have an average pendency of 12 plus years, and 74% of an average lawyer time goes into looking at 500 plus subsections of Indian Penal Act. Now think of this, when this entire thing can be crunched into a text analysis NLP engine like a Google to a lawyer, he or she can quickly go look at kind of a, let's say, case he or she is handling, all the relevancy of those cases with the historical kind of a verdict comes in flat, let's say, quick turnaround time, so that she can expedite the kind of a, let's say, thing in terms of solving the case rather than just looking at those sections. So some of these examples are, I would say, a work in progress. Some of them have already been done. But the fact over there, which I'm trying to build the point, is AI is critically influencing in a big way our decision making. And that's where in the corporates we are talking about maybe a algorithm, miss algorithm sitting in the boardroom, taking decisions either with the board or on behalf of the board. I mean, looks scary, but that could be real in the time to come.
Right, right. Kritika, get ready when you are bleeding and a robot tells you overrule.
No,
Get
no,
ready for that day. It's not very far.
No, it's definitely not very far, and I'm so happy that Samir sir has brought this point to the forefront, because it's such a great time to talk about technology and the use of AI in law, because this entire pandemic, I'm of the opinion that actually it's been an opportunity for the legal profession. So we've been forced into this forced technological revolution, which has suddenly opened the doors of our mind and of all the legal professionals who thought that legal work would only be carried out by humans, have suddenly opened to the idea of being more receptive to technology. So I think what he's saying is absolutely bang on and right.
Right. So let us now proceed to, I can see a lot of exciting questions. Before I take them up, I would like both of you to, give us a sense of the opportunities which exist at two levels. Because from the questions, I can see there are people at three levels. I can see from the questions. There are people in our audience who are either at K-12, I mean 12th graders. That's one level. Then I can see there are some graduates, not necessarily tech graduates, but others also. And I think I can also see some young professionals. So give us a sense of the opportunities which exist, so that these three specific groups I just mentioned, they can make sense of the opportunities which exist in this space of data science and AI. Ravi, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the just looking at Indian market, not necessarily a global market, from close quarters, the need for data science and, and AI ML engineers have gone leaps and bounds in the last just, 4 or 5 years. And the fundamental reason for that is, the proliferation of MNCs. So we're actually setting up IDCs, the development centers here, and solving some of the global problems out of India. And they are sitting pretty on a rich corpus of data, right? And they have the basically a base set in terms of having loads of data. And now they have relevant problem statements, and they're just looking for, and they have the infrastructure in terms of computing power and the storage. Now, all they're looking at is the talent, and that actually led to this the growing demand for data science out of India. And now, if you fast forward a couple of years, in the last 2 years, a lot of these native India-grown startups have also sort of, placed a tremendous emphasis on data-led disruption. Right from the day one, they believed in data-driven disruption. They made right investments. Now, after a few years, they're also looking at a significant data around customers and their business, and now pressing forward on bringing some disruptions driven by data. So this phenomena is leading to organizations lapping up many young engineers or professionals into the realm of data science. And when you say data science, it's a umbrella word, but you have to sort of deconstruct that. And first and foremost, you have to basically invest into putting together a robust data infrastructure, right? And so you need what I call as a data engineer, right, who is working with a few other colleagues in an organization, call it a product and tech business analyst, identifying all the potential data points across the entire life cycle or a journey of a customer or business, and then basically put together the entire plumbing layer. Before even get to the plumbing, you have to come up with the right schema and a structure and a model to be able to assimilate the disparate data sources. Once you have that, you bring in the plumbing aspect. So essentially, you cannot possibly embark on a data science AML AI journey without having this investment upfront. So there's a tremendous opportunity for data engineers with that kind of a skill. And then now you're also looking at, once you have a data in place, then you're also looking at what I call as the analytical or analysis phase. You have a plethora of data, and naked eye cannot catch all of this stuff. So you need to have some sort of a platform to be able to visualize all this data, do a bunch of exploration, identify patterns, right? So now we are looking at somebody who is fundamentally a domain expert in that business, but also has a tremendous appreciation and knack for data and the analytical instinct, right? And aided by this visualization technology. Now, once that's another skill that you're looking at: visualization, data visualization, and data analysis, the business analysis. Then you're talking about what I call as the quintessential data science, right? It's a multidisciplinary field, and here, it's let me debunk this and a little bit, right? You don't oftentimes need a PhD from Carnegie Mellon or a Stanford to make a disruptive impact in a business. Yes, companies, Flipkart included, had the luxury and the fortune of inviting some of the great talent. But if you actually invest in the right infrastructure, you have what I talked about upfront, the data engineering, right ingestion, right data governance. You have a high quality data set, and you built what I call as a ML platform, which essentially post up doing that visualization, identifying various patterns. We have to embark on what we call as features and feature engineering, that essentially bunch of variables that have some correlation to the problem that you're trying to address or outcome that you're trying to impact. So then you basically have to identify that using some platform, and then the algorithms that we talk about more often than not out there. I know they're there in the research domain, and you don't have to invent it from ground zero. You just looking at that algo, tweaking that algo with certain features based on your domain understanding of the business, and making the impact that you desire to create for the business, right? And there's a fair bit of experimentation that goes. It doesn't happen overnight, and so what I'm saying is, so let's dumb it down. These ML platform that I talked about that facilitates all of this stuff is already available in cloud infrastructure, public cloud infrastructure like Amazon Web Services or a GCP or Azure. Right? You no longer have to invest in that infrastructure with all these, rock stars, right? The world has democratized access to solving AI ML problems significantly. We just have to leverage the existing infrastructure that's out there. Now, all those guys on the call can aspire to be, any one of these disciplines, take on any of these disciplines. The data engineer, or a business, or a data analysis, or a visualization engineer, or a data scientist. And finally, once you have the algorithm or a model, you need someone, the soft coder to code it in a way that it scales well at a few petabytes of data, right? That's what his AML engineer does. He doesn't understand algorithms. He doesn't have to understand algorithms. That is the function of a data scientist. Even data scientist, he doesn't have to build this algorithm or innovate this algorithm from ground zero. For most problem statements, the algorithms are already out there. You just have to train them and test them against the data set that you have, right? For that, you need to have a very robust a platform, which is again provided by cloud infrastructure. You don't have to invest into that, right? So that's if you're a decent coder and understand the discipline reasonably well, we can get cracking, right? And what institutes can do is basically not just bring these disciplines as they're designing the curriculum, but also do their bit in terms of collaborating with companies or businesses who have access to rich corpus of data, and have them bubble up some of the problem statements they are grappling with, and that becomes some sort of a case study for the students. And because this is not one of those skills you can actually do it without data, right? Fundamental to all this stuff is having access to the data. So if you can find a way to connect to an industry and then have them actually collaborate, and then the students or aspiring professionals will have a lot more to glean or learn from that. And those are 4-5 distinct job families I see.
Excellent. And before I come to Samir, I want to show to all the audience this small little image here. And my question to all the audience and to Samir is that the statement in this slide says that both the cameraman and the pilot lost their jobs in 10 years. That's a statement you can see in this slide. And my question to all the audience is, actually, 3 guys lost their jobs. Who is the third guy? Please write your answers in the chat box. I'm going to ask Samir the same question. Who is the third guy in this slide who lost the job in the span of 10 years from 2010 to 2020? Samir, over to you. Who is the third guy who lost the job? Please give us a sense of the new opportunities which are on the horizon. Over to you.
The way drones are actually kind of cutting across all these visual aspects, Navneet, I can very well claim that even the job of a data scientist would be in danger, because, as Ravi already said, that data science, AI, ML is getting automated. It's getting institutionalized. It's getting democratized. And somewhere, I think it's not only the cameraman or the pilot, but somewhere these data crunchers also going through a change where if everything is available on the go, on a platform, then what do you do, kind of a thing, which brings to the point which Ravi rightfully articulated, that look, the industry has been there for 20 years. Roles have changed, and so has been the ability of organizations to consume data science and analytics. It's not there what it used to be 20 years back in terms of MIS reports and all. Now think of this. First of all, I completely agree with Ravi in terms of these data aggregation opportunities, to data mediation, wrangling, hosting on the cloud environment, to visualization, to the ML aspect of model building. There are almost about 200 job families within analytics, data science, AI today. It's a well expansive kind of a field. Cuts across all industry. You take any industry today, they would be using AI, ML, data science. You take any business function today, whether it's HR or sales, marketing, or let's say finance, they would be using this kind of a thing as well. Now, case in point, in HR today, many of us have moved digital. And we know that today, as part of, let's say, a whole set of sitting across the laptops, computers, desktops, we sometimes tend to lose attention. So just like in kind of exam papers today, there is a black check which is being done to ensure that the student doesn't copy much. There is also an HR kind of a, let's say, thing which has come in by using computer vision, facial expressions technique. They're trying to understand the mood of the employees sitting across home. Are they disgruntled? Are they too much worked? Or there is too much of rebalancing of personal or work situation which is happening, and then they're accordingly giving awards or appreciation basis the moodometers. I mean, and this is something sitting across where all these expressions are being monitored, kind of a thing. And all these things linking back, Navneet, are the part of the job opportunities for aspirants and existing professionals. Now, there is a pent-up demand, more than 100, 200,000 open opportunities. But one thing I keep on saying as part of AI, ML, data science opportunity, look, AI alone will not solve the problem in entirety. It's a combination, or it's a trifecta, I call it a triangle of AI, data engineering, and design. And I'll come to the design piece. And data engineering, Ravi alluded to that part. Simple case, Jennifer Aniston, the actress from the Friends kind of a series, when she joined, and she's been late in joining Instagram, when she joined, within 15-20 minutes, she got 7.5 million followers. Instagram crashed. Next day, New York Times reported Instagram algorithms do not work. Now, that's not a challenge of algorithm. It's the data pipes which were not able to support that huge velocity of data, kind of a thing. So equally as we have today a job which is about crunching algorithms, looking at building kind of, let's say, robust models, can we also look at building strong data pipes under data engineering? And that's where a lot of this containerization, self-serving approaches, a lot of this cloud infrastructure is getting built. Third, not to miss, is design. Now, I keep on saying, there were times in my career when we used to depend on something called AC Nielsen or IMRB data, T plus 45. It used to take 45 days to get a last month data. By that time, your 45 days of sales cycle is gone. How do you plan? How do you optimize your marketing budget? Comes a situation today where, like, we take an example, human behaviors, cognitive neuroscience, design thinking, behavioral science is being studied. And I'm given to understand Vijay Bhumi University has this liberal kind of an aspect of learning, which is first in its genre. Also have design program, data science, and AIML. Now think of this. A real case of design to me is toothbrush. Many of the toothbrush comes with, let's say, this IoT sensor. Not a big deal. Many of the devices today have sensors and all. And idle brushing time for anyone is 2 minutes. We realize many of us who have kids do not brush for 2 minutes. It's a tedious task, specifically when they have to get up in the morning. Now, Oral-B came up with this toothbrush which had a sensor, but more than that, they had this visualized dashboard which you can download through an app on your mobile. Good. The app can actually show in terms of a visually appealing dashboard the turnaround time, how much the kid is brushing. Anything less than 2 minutes, the emoji on that app turns red. There is a frowning noise. You show it to the kid, she will get a bit terrified or petrified, and she will start brushing again. 2 minutes over, now you show to the kid, there is a happy emoji, and we know that today our life is getting governed by emojis and emoticons. You show it to the kid, she's happy because now there is a jingle, she goes to the school. Now that's a different thing, that this toothbrush is being used more by the adults. 2 minutes is a long brushing time. But think what rules regulation cannot do. This is what design thinking, behavioral science does it, what we call how do you design for a subconscious mind. And that's where I say AI, design, and engineering will be the way how the problem solving at scale will happen in the future for businesses, enterprises, or even for humanity.
I think that's a very, very valuable point, that it is the combination of multiple disciplines which will really produce the results, which will really solve the problems. In the meantime, let me show you a small image which a lot of your audience are also reflecting. And let me pick up a few questions from the chat box, because there are a number of, I can see a volley of questions coming in. And so I will go from the latest to the oldest questions. And there's a question which says that what are the 2 or 3 most important skill sets that FARA engineers need to hone once employed, and what are the basic skills required to get an entry-level job in the tech product? And if you have taken a look at this image, this clearly shows the disruption which is happening all around us. Why did you leave your last job? The company relocated and did not tell me where. This is a classic, development which we see all over. But coming back to the skill question, if both of you can articulate what are the most critical skills which are required by the graduates at the entry level and maybe at the slightly senior level, how do you really simplify it, acquire it, and so as to be ready for the new age jobs? Ravi, do you want to take that question first?
Yeah, I will. And before that, I wanted to mention one thing, and that must be pretty interesting for the audience to understand. Speaking of the design, now that Samir actually spoken about importance of design, and actually something amazing will come out at the intersection of design and AI, and of course, having the right technology platform for design of experimentation, right? So what Myntra, many of you know, is a fashion e-commerce portal. Of course, it's a subsidiary of Flipkart, but known for its fashion. It's probably the #1 destination for fashion in India. And about 4 years ago, we seeded one initiative which is largely around looking at the data that we have around the various trends in fashion design across various categories. It could be a young woman, it could be a school-going kids, and the young urban male. Right, there are various trends that go at any given time, and these are very ephemeral in nature, and these trends kind of change from time to time, and they're pretty quick as well, right? So how do we actually bring data science AI into play to be able to predict what is this one design that is actually going to hold a fashion industry in good stead, right? The traditional way of looking at is look at the designers in Milan and some of those destinations where they bring their inspiration and dole out a set of designs, and then a lot of others draw some inspiration from that, right? And that's not scalable, right? What we actually did in order to make fashion accessible for average Joe and bring the cost significantly down, we looked at a bunch of designs that are already there at any given point in time, and taking cognizance of all the trends, we built what we call as a neural network infrastructure. It's called GAN, Generative Adversarial Network. So it looks at a bunch of these designs that are trending today, and it has an ability to predict what are the designs that are likely to do well in future, right? Based on various aspects, right? It's the cognitive understanding of user, a behavioral understanding of user, and a bunch of other signals. And we come up with a design that is derived by machine or doled out by a machine using AML, neural network. And we actually gave it to various manufacturers, apparel manufacturers. And we piloted in the beginning, and they basically produced it at scale. And then we contrasted it with some of the other SKUs out there in the similar category. And uptick of this design is significantly better than what we've seen, right? And that's again going back to machine automating even design aspect at some level, right? Who would have thought, you would potentially, challenge the creativity of designing genius sitting in Milan, right? And that has been reasonably addressed with our neural network-driven algorithms. So just thought I would mention, and that was a case study for many tech shops, not just in India, outside India as well, and we are pretty proud of that work. So coming back to
right,
coming back to your question, Navneet. So I like I said, right? I don't want to come up with a canned answer, because it's also a function of what job family you're looking at, and while there are a few tens or a few hundreds, like Samir said, definite job families, and they're well understood by many who are closely following this discipline. But to me, broadly, as a practitioner, they all fall into 4 or 5 job families, right? And that's talked about the data engineering and visualization, decision science, or business analysis, and data science, and AML engine. So you just have to figure out what is that you're passionate about. And I don't know, universities like Vijay Bhumi, I'm very happy to know that you're putting together this multidisciplinary program that's all encompassing in nature, giving the exposure to the students across all these disciplines, and making them aware what all that needs to come together to create an impact in the business through AML, and then sort of and we should probably leave it to the individual, right? Once he's aware of the common denominator skills, and then let him actually let him or her come up with the thing that she's or he is passionate about. Somebody is just good at or rather passionate about looking at data and bringing them together and crunching it, right? Call it data engineering, right? Yeah, that's very exciting for him, right? And that's one thing. So then somebody is good at algorithmic thinking, right? And as long as he has a basic understanding of math and statistics, and he can come on board and sort of build upon from that basic orientation to the level required to perform his job, right? So what I'm saying is, as opposed to sort of looking at all these 6 job families and assimilating all the skills, right? Be aware what skills will get you where, and you also have to have some inclination or propensity for a certain job family, and then sort of build upon that, right? I think if a university which is designing this program can actually
Right.
put together just the common denominator, that's good enough, and the rest organizations will actually help the person to get there. And learnability, of course, is a key skill there, and we have done enough in the recent past, in the last 4 or 5 years, for someone to get to where he needs to get to perform his job. That's what I call as democratization, right? So they're not a steep learning curve anymore.
Right. Samir, coming to you, because there are a number of questions, can I request to both of you, because I want to take up as many questions as possible. So if you can give sharp answers to these questions, I think that will be really, really helpful. There are two questions I'm taking up from the chat box. How AI can benefit in agriculture field, and what are the different ways to implement them? And there's another one, how AI can be used in the field of plastics industry. Very precise questions, sectoral questions. I would like to invite both reflections from both of you. Samir, would you like to go first?
I can take the agriculture one, Navneet, and this is something which I have worked in the past through one of the government agency. Uh, uh, IIT Chennai in India today has a soil density data of all the districts in India from last 27 odd years. And soil density is a crucial kind of a factor in terms of understanding the crop yield of the farmers and the patterns in terms of what farmers should be kind of, let's say, creating or should be kind of reaping in terms of the crop. Nagpur, as we all know, is known for oranges. Over the years, we have studied in our schools and learned through many textbooks that it's known for oranges. Farmers had a concern a few years back that their income from oranges have dwindled in Nagpur because of whatever deterioration of the soil or the crop or yield or whatever. Prices haven't changed though, actually, so it's not the prices. So when the data was analyzed using the data from IIT Chennai and a lot of demographic data of the soil pattern of Nagpur districts in and around for oranges, it came out that maybe now it's the time for farmers to look at some other crop because there is always a marginal utility for a particular crop over the years because of the soil deterioration due to multiple factors. And that's where AI was used to determine what kind of a crop they should be kind of growing. This was across what we call a smart precision agriculture kind of, let's say, technique. And for the first time, starting next year, farmers will be growing different variety of crop outside of oranges using AI/ML techniques, kind of a thing. A very simple other example, very quickly, Kisan call center line. It's available in 32 dialects in India. I mean, you can just pick up the phone if you have a query about any kind of a seed, crop, pattern, weather, any production around the farming, agriculture. You call up, it will answer in your language what you're calling for. It's not a call center kind of a technique. It's an NLP engine which is running in the background, changing the dialect as you actually speak, and kind of the whole database of those kind of FAQs have been built to kind of just cater to the farmers in that. So just two quick examples, Navneet. I want to talk about AI in agriculture.
And I mean, similarly, there's a question on AI applications in manufacturing industry. Do you want to provide your reflection on it, Ravi?
So yeah, again, applications are plenty, and I'm not sure how we would address this. We're talking about Industry 4.0 and manufacturing is basically going through a tremendous transformation as we speak. So again, there's IoTs play a big role there, and today almost every new age manufacturing unit, people talking about putting sensors and it can address many things, starting from fundamentally increasing the productivity and throughput on your shop floor, and looking at the time and motion studies today, and looking at various inefficiencies that you have on the floor, And in the past, you need a shop supervisor to be able to get a handle on the assembly line workflow. And today with IoTs and sensors, you can actually define your unit of work from point A to point B, and then basically instrument, much like we instrument certain probes in the virtual world. You can instrument certain probes in the form of IoTs. And basically, end of the day, supervisor can actually look at the entire data and see what are the lacunas and what are the hotspots or bottlenecks in the shop floor, right? And then he can quickly intervene and address that. And that is what data is saying. And then, and that is basically not necessarily a course correction, but in the beginning, identifying where the issue is. And then over time, what we are actually doing is, if it is led by machine, you can actually input that data into the machine and say, this is what you need to do to sort of address the bottleneck that we are seeing, right? And call it a mesh. Over time with data, someone doesn't have to prescribe what needs to be done. Machine will know by itself how to course correct and change the path within that unit of work to optimally yield the result and with a better throughput, right? And the second thing is basically, once you address the fundamental issues around productivity, another thing is actually, again, going back to the customer, right? Every manufacturing industry, end of the day, have to manufacture some good or a product that is going to the customer, right? And I think that they can be now far more close to what customer wants if they have data orientation. Their front-end systems can actually understand customer preferences. So oftentimes your design is so complex. You're looking for some product design that addresses many distinct personalities, but in reality there's a 80-20, right? If you just do a damn good job in addressing these 5 features, and and bring the cost significantly down and pass on that goodness to the customer, right? And you have a product market fit, versus boiling the ocean, bringing all the tertiary frills and so on and so forth, right? So manufacturing industry not just see their job being let me do my job most efficiently, deliver more throughput, but also go one step further. Stay close to the end customer, disintermediate some of these layers. Even if you have to live with the layers, can you find ways to get data at a customer feedback come in? That will also help you come up with the right product design and morph your manufacturing to address that product, right? And it will significantly bring down a manufacturing cost as well, right? So, those are a few examples that I talked about, right? And I'm sure, depending upon what industry you're looking at, we can get into those specifics. So this is I've just taken a broader take at it.
Right. There are a couple of questions on the learning pathways, and I really empathize with the candidates who have asked this question. And I want to request both of you to put yourself in the shoes of a 12th grader, in the shoes of a graduate, or in the shoes of a young professional. And there are pathway questions. So, for example, there are questions which say that somebody is studying maths and science at the 12th level. Should such a person specialize at the graduate level or at the postgraduate level? That is one kind of question. Couple of questions I can see on this line. The second one, similarly, the graduates are asking, should they really pursue specialized courses or degrees or diplomas at this level or at the PG level? Do you want to simplify this query? Number of people have asked this question. How can people really prepare themselves for these opportunities which you have listed in your answers in a while, and how to prepare for these? Give us a sense of the learning pathway. If there is any formula which you like, Samir, you want to go first?
Yeah.
So before Samir answers it, I'm just going to add one more question, because I was seeing a couple of questions that, if you could talk about, a lot of students have this doubt, especially at a 12th standard level, that you have to come from a particular stream to be able to pursue a career in data sciences or artificial intelligence. So if you could also answer that aspect in this, I think this would be very helpful for our audience who have joined us today.
Sure. So that helps. So combining Kritika, Navneet to the question, it's a very pertinent question. I wish we had that kind of options when I was graduating out from the school or the college. But let's say for the +2 and graduate, this is what my own perception and my own learning says. 18 of my 23 years of career have been spent into analytics. And one thing I can say over there is, look, if you are serious around this particular profession, start early. I mean, this particular field, area, practice is not going away from next 15, 20 years and beyond, because there is the path and the evolution that is followed, as you can relate to what me and Ravi were saying in terms of various evolution aspects. But what is more important is, when I say start early, one, regardless of the background you come in, and as one can hear during this entire 60 minutes of conversation, there are hundreds of job families and career lattice into AI, ML, data science, analytics today across different industries. There is a pent up demand because of the COVID. It will open up more because of digital transformation taking accelerated pace. For students, particularly, I think if they are serious around saying, look, data science, AI, ML is their future, start early. Now, what is important, of course, while they pick up the course or the kind of a program which is relevant, I give a very high emphasis on saying, through my own learning, it has to be multi-dimensional, multi kind of disciplinary. We learned through the discussion, it's not just AI alone. They need to have an adequate exposure about multiple aspects, tools, techniques, data engineering to kind of, let's say, algorithms, to even design facet of understanding. Now, that's where the problem solving thing for students and graduates comes into the picture. Whether it's an interview or a process of gauging or assessment, eventually for any client or end user, we are solving a problem using AI ML analytics. Now, the question which is an obvious, how many problems you can learn? Fact is, every industry has their own unique problems. What, as a student or a graduate, needs to understand while they go through these curriculums and program, conceptually they need to be very strong, because they need to look whether the curriculum is end-to-end, fungible, dynamic, and also does it incorporate all the elements of engineering, AI, ML, and design. The other thing is the contextual learning. Once you understand the conceptual learning, can you go through on the GitHub and Kaggle and start downloading data sets, anonymize kind of a data, and start solving the problem on your own? Of course, the universities, the programs have that, but this is what I call your own learning. Can you build your own A-level Kaggle score, which helps you not only understanding different nuances of the industry, relating how data science is solving, but that score helps you getting a top-notch edge above any other professional over there. And by virtue of that, your learning of contextualized aspect also comes into the picture. So over there, I think if some of these things students, whether they are +2 or kind of they are graduates, starts doing it, I think they will become holistic in terms of their own learning of AI, ML, and data science program.
Right, right. On this, your reflections, Ravi, quickly on this learning pathway. How can one prepare oneself for these opportunities?
I think I'll keep it short. I think Samir had eloquently addressed, how one should go about it. I think one other important point I want to emphasize, I think he briefly touched upon, unlike other skill in technology realm, if you want to be a good AML engineer or a data scientist, you need to find a way to work on a problem statement that is close to real life problem, right? And I remember even 15 years ago, a Kaggle-like platform did an amazing job in terms of working with industries and assimilating bunch of business problem statements that are real in nature, and offered it on the platform, anonymizing the data from the corporations, and reached out to aspirants and saying, hey, here are the problem statements. Now it's kind of, pick your trade or pick your skill while you're on the job, right? While you're really solving a problem, right? And that actually, gives you a lot of credence, and you learn a lot, and that hold you in good stead when you're seeking a job. And fortunately, that is become a mainstream kind of an activity now in many programs who are offering upskilling for aspirants, whether it's HackerEarth or HackerRank or Kaggle is still there. but I don't know how many of you know the personalization engine that we talked about, the Netflix has, which is probably the best in the industry. And it's basically a innovation that came out of Kaggle platform by open sourcing that problem to young students and professionals who are aspiring to get into data science, right? So I say that while universities help them pick the basic the common denominator skills, I think they need to really get on board with some of these platforms, take on embrace the real problem statement, and start working on that, right? And then in the process they realize what, I dig a data engineering discipline. Oh, you know what, I'm more into the visualization aspect. I think I have this algorithmic thinking. Let me actually go deep into that vertical, and I may have to do some advanced program, right, to enhance my skill there, or credibility there. So that's how it evolves, right? And it's not one of those things where you can sit in a classroom and claim that you mastered it, right? You have to find ways to work. It can also be being part of some industry connect program and working as an intern, and a lot of startups are willing to do that lately.
Right, and let me ask you this question again to you, Ravi. There's a question. Somebody is saying, I'm into financial securities. Will data science help in predicting and understanding future trend? I think the answer is no, but nevertheless, a quick answer from you will help.
I don't know, as far as saying, the answer is not, and it depends on what financial security we're looking at, you can never discount what data can do and AML can do in terms of predicting future, right? We've been humbled time and again when we sort of said, XYZ is not in the realm of possibility. With the right data and more computing power, and algorithms have done amazing job being able to come up with accurate predictions. So now that said, you have to bound your problem statement and not make it very open-ended. And so I mean, if you're looking for a binary answer from me, I wouldn't rule out, and it's very much in the striking distance and the realm of possibility. You have to look at various data sources that are internal, external, and that's another thing, right? I think the biggest change that needs to happen, I think governments and policymakers are getting their head around, is we have these disparate source of data and humongous source of data sitting in pockets, in silos, right? Governments have to, and the policymakers have to do a bang-up job in terms of creating these data banks, what I call as data bank. There should be a data bank for financial services. There should be a data bank for health care, right? The data that Flipkart claimed to have pales in comparison with the data that government has access to. They're probably a few thousand times more. Just that we are not harnessing all the data. We should actually keep all the data out there, let the budding entrepreneurs and startup ecosystem have a go at it, and sort of solve some of these problems that we've been grappling with, right? That have a massive societal impact, right? And I think that's something that we need to do. Once that is available, I wouldn't discount anything from the realm of possibility.
Right, and I want to take a very, very fundamental question to you, Samir. There's a question: is robotics a part of AI, or AI is part of robotics? I think you will love to answer this.
What I call it,
Samir?
in terms of a different spin, Navneet, is it's rebalancing human and machine equation. That's automation, that robotics. Whether it's Sophia who's sitting across to you doing the household chores, or let's say a teacher who could be robotics, or to the earlier narrative, a lawyer being a robotic. More important over there is, I think as humans, first of all, we'll have to put, and Ravi said it as part of his narrative, we have to really kind of take one aspect where it's not AI first, it's humanity first. There is a rebalancing situation which is happening today in terms of robots, humanity, and what I say external geo factors. We've seen how it's impacting every one of us. Then there is this whole notion of job losses, displacements, and all. But it's more important is that the core essence of automation will be to enhance the true nature of the job. I give an example over there. Radiologist is considered to be a very glamorous sought after job. He or she takes about 15 to 20 minutes to analyze an X-ray, CT scan, looking at various kind of a thing. The chances of error because of being overworked, oversight, negligence is high. You get a deep learning algorithm crunching millions of X-rays, CTC, kind of MRIs and CT scans in few milliseconds. The machine has the ability to predict with 99.8% accuracy. The first question comes in as part of automation is, are we saying radiologist as a job is over? No. The job of a radiologist in a core way is to enhance the well-being of the patient. Somewhere I have never seen a radiologist asking, are you feeling okay, and this is what you should be doing to kind of, let's say to get better. Rather, he or she is just looking at the x-ray and just telling you what's wrong, what's the symptom. That is what automation, AI will do. I think I just wanted to keep it brief over there, Navneet.
Right. And then there are questions, again, sectoral questions. Somebody has asked, can AI be involved in space research also? Ravi?
Yeah, so yeah, I know. Apologies, not someone that understands rocket science and space research as much as I would like to, and and I think if you look at the recent innovations, right, propelled by SpaceX and now Blue Earth, again an initiative from Jeff Bezos, and SpaceX is from Elon Musk. Right, and they've done an amazing things, and it's just simple. I wouldn't call it simple. A complex thing like launching a rocket into an orbit. And in the past, it used to be a highly cost-intensive thing. Once you launch it, and that's it. It does its job one time, and you're done, right? And you spend few billions of dollars to be able to launch something into a space station or into an orbit beyond the current International Space Station. Right now, we are talking about a technology where you can basically launch something and then have an ability to redock yourself, and you can reuse that for a future launches as well. And I'm sure a lot of AI and machine learning that came into being, and it's unarmed stuff, it's making a lot of real-time decisionings and driven by data, and while it's in its flight reaching the orbit, right? And that's a phenomenal achievement from mankind, and who would have thought that would have been a possibility a few years ago? And thanks to these disruptors and innovators like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos is pretty much pushing the envelope there as well. And again, they are within striking distance, and they proved it it could be done. There were many naysayers, but they proved them wrong.
I want to take another basic question. A very, very critical question. What are the prerequisites for going towards AI and ML? I think you need to open up a good expert's mind on this, Samir. What are the prerequisites before one can really take a deep dive into AI and ML?
Sure. So, Navneet, I think that goes without saying, and I'm sure through the discussion, one can always relate and figure out an understanding, a firm understanding of statistics, operational research, mathematics is required. There is no denying the fear of unknown of mathematics has to go away, because somewhere AI, ML, the foundations over there needs to be strong in terms of understanding that data through OR, statistical things. The second prerequisites, many of the universities have that covered, is set of tools, libraries, and technologies. Of course, it keeps on changing, and I keep on saying as part of my own learning, please do not get distorted by these tools and technologies. They strictly follows Moore's law. What is relevant today, let's say Python, may not be relevant when they pass out, but that is not material. What is material at that stage is, do they understand how these tools and technologies gets applied on the problem solving? Third aspect is, as one can see, because of sophistication of image, voice, text, and video, the understanding of these data sets of these four areas is important. How an image works in terms of classification, how conversational AI works in terms of picking up different kind of, let's say, voice from the signals, as we say. That is very important. Fourth dimension is also what I say, equal understanding of blending all these things in terms of problem solving. As Ravi also said, 50% of the projects till date today in data science, AI, ML gets aborted or gets kind of, let's say, pruned by the client, because they are not able to get the desired result, because somewhere that ability to understand the problem solving or ability to even understand the problem goes astray when we are just telling clients, oh, we should be using CNN technique, RNN techniques, GAN charts and all. Look, if the clients would have understood these techniques, they would have done it by themselves. Somewhere that correlation of understanding the problem, marrying with the AI ML is required. Last is being very ethical. And this is exactly what I think in all across in the fraternity, we are being talking about responsible AI. We have seen enough kind of havoc cases being created, geographies, political leaders, sportsmen, even professionals using data on the wrong side. And just like in doctors, medicine, we have Hippocratic oath. I think somewhere we also need to have something where the data is not used by any aspirants in a wrongful manner. I think some of these things as a prerequisite, Navneet, will help them kind of scale up the ladder of AI/ML.
So, if I may, I'll just add one other important aspect
and
again.
There's again a sectoral question.
Navneet, Ravi had a point actually, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Navneet, there's one other important question. We oftentimes talk about the skills that they need to acquire, right? And I think we both, Samir and I, alluded to that pretty much during the conversation. One other important aspect is a strong understanding of business problem, right? Not every problem you expect to solve using deep learning and neural network. And supposedly deep learning and neural network, you just define problem statement, identify, come up with the right data set, few terabytes of data and huge computing power. It will differentiate a cat from a dog, right? Without you having to give any narrative on top of that, right? But most problem statements don't require a neural network solves. They could be a simple logistic regression, a random forest, the algorithm that are already there. But in order for you to sort of, put those algorithms into play, you need to have a good understanding of business on day one, right? Even let's say you're building a credit underwriting model for a rural woman, right? The credit bureaus don't seem to have a clue how to underwrite or how to score that person, because she hasn't basically been lent before by any financial services, and hence there's not much data, right? Now a new age fintech company trying to go and come with underwriting model and solve problem for underserved, unserved. Now that person, no matter how good he is in mathematics and statistics and algorithmic thinking, he still needs to have a decent understanding of, what are some of the elements that define a financial well-being of a rural woman, right? And, it could be the kind of educational background or a livelihood activity that she's embarking on, the current cash flows, and then the geopolitical factors that influence, right? There are various aspects that come in the way, and you need to have fundamentally some native understanding of what factors influence, and then that becomes your what I call as in a technical terms your potential features, feature engineering, and that becomes they become input into your model, and then over time you basically give more weightage to certain feature and less weightage to certain feature, and that's where then when you train and test, and there's a feedback loop, right, that tells you what feature is having a much higher correlation versus some other features, right? That discipline, no academic program can teach you that. No matter how many algorithms you studied, that knowledge, unless you have, consciously taken interest to understand the business problem, you'll not be able to glean that. So it's absolutely important. I've seen many failed experiments in the organization. If you approach the solving a business problem purely academically, throwing kitchen sink at it without having a comprehension on the business understanding, they've miserably failed, right? Though that's another intangible that one needs to get their head around.
Right. And there's a question where somebody is asking, how will AI and ML affect movie industry application happening? But do you want to provide a quick reflection on this, Ravi? AI and movie.
AI and movies, yeah. So the what Samir, help me here, right? There's this new genre of movies that I see on Netflix, right? At any given time you have multiple pivots depending upon your personal interest, right? the movies, it's got multiple parts. All of us are watching the same movie, ABC, but Navneet is very different from Raviji. Raviji is different from Samir, right? And we have certain understanding. We have certain interests. We want drama to be played in certain way, right? It's like you have the same content, but can you make it personalized for Navneet and Samir and Raviji? And there are movies made like that, right? Depending upon who is signing up for that movie, the path that the stream takes is very different than what is streamed for you. And I forgot the term for that. It's a new concept. And in fact,
what you rightly said, this is a project which was led by Disney, and they call it cliffhanger moment. Let's say we are watching a thriller genre, and four of us would like to see a different ending. Now, basis our previous assumption and viewing pattern, and if you see many of these title series over there have today a very kind of a standard cliffhanger moment. It reaches to that pinnacle, and before it ends, it stays there, so that you have inclination and a very high level of intrigue to watch the next kind of a, let's say, episode. So, but here now they're going a step further. Kritika, Navneet, Ravi, and me would like to watch a different kind of a, let's say, end. So the cliffhanger moment changes based on our viewing pattern. And this is exactly what AIML is trying to do.
Absolutely. Yep.
So if I may add there, actually, I also read something really interesting on the subject, where, they were talking about that how script writing is actually going to be done by AI-powered machines. So I'll actually share the link of that article that I read. It was written by Prasoon Joshi. So I think there's a lot of scope even in movies when it comes to artificial intelligence. Actually, before we close the session, as I see we have already exceeded, and how, because there's so many questions coming in. So the last question that if I may propose from my side is, so while we have addressed a lot of the concerns of the students, so, we have also concerns that have been raised by young executives, where they're saying that, they're working in completely different lines. But, today they're very fascinated by the world and opportunities offered by AI, machine learning, and data sciences. And, they would actually like to come and switch and probably consider and explore job roles in these areas. Is there any way they can do so without going through any kind of certification, or if certifications are mandatory, then what would be the right pathway? If you can please throw some light on that, because I think we have a large part of our audience who's also looking at that moment of transition.
Yeah, so Samir, I'll quickly take a minute or two, and then you can expound on it further as well. So I think back in the day when we started data science and AML discipline in our organizations, we are operating with a set mindset, and we had our own constraints in our head. We need to look for XYZ with this kind of a background, this kind of experience, and not just having the right credentials academically speaking, but prior experience as well, right? I think with the advent of many things having been democratized, and I spoke about it at the beginning, right? I think that set thinking has dramatically changed in the hiring manager's mind, right? That said, you can obviously learn on the job, but hiring manager feels comfortable if you have gone through a formal program. Whether the program is a program that he undergone from a university such as Vijayabhumi, which is formalized in this program, or any other institutes out there who've done a pretty amazing work. My intent is not to market any of these upskill shops out there, whether it's Udacity, InSophie, or bunch of upskilling shops out there. I would advise somebody who's a rank outsider to actually go through that program, and and he's obviously gone through some structured learning, and which is a blend of relevant academics as well as some hopefully a good connect with industry problem statement, and that will hold him or her in good stead when he's approaching a hiring manager. So that would be my take. And I'm sure if you are smart, if you have learnability, you can learn on the job. But I think then you're leaving it to hiring managers' trust in you, which is pretty damn hard thing for hiring managers to make that call. If you have some formal program that you're coming from, whether it's a university program or otherwise, and with some experience, definitely helps. Experience doesn't mean prior job experience. Experience having dealt with this discipline in some form or fashion. Yeah.
Samir sir, if we could hear from you.
Sure. So one, I would rather take a bit of provocative thing, and this is my own thinking, foundational though. The time has come, just like we say roti, kapda, makan, and data. We should add the fifth tenet, which is called roti, kapda, makan, data, and learning. It's time for us to realize we have to put learning as part of our monthly budgets. It's come over the years very subsidized, thinking that, okay, we require one-time learning and that's enough. That's not going to happen. Careers have gone for changes. Every few years, you got to take a degree, course, program, or a certification. That's a must kind of a thing. I think there are ample data points over there, which gives, it's not only for early stage professionals, Kritika, is even for senior professionals like us, because the careers today are not just 25, 30 years because of high longevity. It's now 50, 55 years. If one has to survive the relevancy thing, they have to go through the programs kind of a thing multiple times in their career. So that's one. Second is, for both early stage professionals, there are two routes. One, who are coming from technology industry, and there are 1.8 million professionals in technology industry who are, I called, lateral professionals with a kind of a legacy application experience. But today, those legacy applications like QA, Java, .NET have become redundant. And then there are early stage professionals who are from sectoral sides, be it kind of a paints or manufacturing or let's say finance or banking, but are striving to get to the next level because the opportunities over there starts receding. Now for both, if we look for the sake of materiality of this question, data science AML proves out to be a good path because one, for early stage professionals coming from technology background who have kind of gone through a programming set of coding, good part is that they understand the rigmaroles of coding. In our parlance, we call them geeks. So making them go through that program or having they go through a program which has ample kind of a good coding, understanding, programming techniques of AIML would be a kind of a career switch where they can relate and they go into that sphere. For early stage professionals from the sectoral, their domain expertise, subject matter expertise is very handy. Because if the questions are of any relevance, we could relate today, the applications of AI, ML is pervasive today. Take every industry, whether from a paint to a shipping, AI, ML works beautifully over there. And companies are hiring, whether it's technology, pure play consulting, even Indian enterprises, global, they're hiring over there. So there are ample opportunities over there for both these segments of early stage professionals to get into AI ML stream.
Thank you so much.
That's really very, very enlightening. That's really nice. And to close this, let me pose a single question from the chat box to both of you. If and when do you think AI will surpass human intelligence? Samir, do you want to go first?
Well, neither I'm on the side of Mark Zuckerberg, neither on Elon Musk. The naysayers or naysayers is not my kind of a, let's say, category. I keep on saying, look, with one particular attach that whenever humanity has been challenged, it stood above and beyond in terms of teaching everyone a lesson. COVID is a time where new formulas, new methods, new models have evolved. So just like in the few years, trust me, if any such thing happens, we will treat COVID or any such event like a black swan event. We will get tuned, we will get acclimatized, and that's what AIML automation will also happen, because the moment it reaches that sophistication, humanity has something that I say to a different notch up and above.
Ravi?
For me, that question is that I know that I'm not sounding cocky, a little benign. And if you look at AML, all it's trying to do is mimic human intelligence. It's only trying to do that a little faster, not a little faster, substantially faster. but it's always trying to catch up, right? And it's still in the process of catching up. And the human, for the next foreseeable future, I mean, I'm not, living in the pure imaginary world and sniper world. But I even in that scenario, what we've seen up until now is the people keeping their imagination wild and trying to sort of stretch their human intelligence. And then what machines are trying to do is sort of align to that imagination that we have in our head, right? So that's the way I see it. And I don't think one need to worry. I actually go to the extent of saying I'm one of those who not unduly worried about the machines surpassing human intelligence. Human intelligence will keep the humanity in good stead, and the machines will do their part, automating a great deal, bringing a lot of goodness to society at scale. And humans have to step up to the plate and do their bit to do the good cause to the society, which up until now they are stuck in the drudgery and doing the basic stuff. Now let's take the help of a machine and elevate ourselves and step up to the plate and for a greater cause of society.
Right. And to all the audience, I would just like to draw your attention to what physicist Michio Kaku said about the general cognitive ability, or in simple words, common sense. And he said that even the most advanced robots and algorithms today have the intelligence of a cockroach. So we have time. I don't think there is undue reason. There isn't really a reason to worry too much about machines. It has been a great pleasure to have both of you. And at least if I can express my own feeling, how I feel about this conversation, I am feeling like a rasgulla in the chashni. So therefore, this has been an absolute pleasure to host both of you and all the audience, along with my co-host Kritika. Thank you very much for your time, energy, and totally committed answers. They have added tremendous value. Thank you very much, one and all.
Pleasure to be with all of you, and really enjoyed this session along with two of you. The moderators done a fabulous job, and Samir, great to have you alongside, and some very probing, interesting questions from the audience as well, and they kept us engaged, and much appreciated.
Thanks, Ravi, and likewise, thanks Navneet, thanks Kritika, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Navneet sir. Take care, everyone.